Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the surprisingly dramatic tale of how one spiky fruit took over the hearts, minds, and dinner tables of 17th century London. Picture it: fog curling through cobblestone alleys, wigs powdered to the heavens, and on a silver platter in the center of a mahogany table, glowing like treasure under candlelight, is a pineapple. A fruit so strange and dazzling, some Londoners genuinely believed it came from heaven, or worse, France. It's hard to imagine today when pineapples show up pre-sliced in plastic tubs, that once upon a time this tropical fruit was a fearsome status symbol, an object so rare and opulent people treated it with a reverence normally reserved for saints' relics or first edition Shakespeare folios. You wouldn't eat it. You'd display it. Worship it, maybe even rent it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You hear the gulls long before you see the port. The year is 1668. You've trudged from your rented room near Bread Street to the bustling Thames docks, stepping around heaps of horse dung, the odd rat, and the occasional passed-out sailor. The air smells of wet rope fish and just faintly spice. Clove, maybe, or cinnamon. You're here to witness the unloading of a Dutch merchant ship rumored to be carrying pineapples. Real ones. Not paintings or papier-mâché mock-ups, but actual sun-ripened, golden-skinned pineapples from the New World. There's already a crowd gathering, which tells you everything. Word spreads fast when a pineapple's involved. The crate arrives under watchful eyes. It's packed in straw and guarded like treasure. A hush falls as the top is pried open. The dockmaster reaches in, slowly, reverently, and lifts the fruit high. The onlookers gasp. You gasp. It's smaller than you expected and bumpier, but the green crown is unmistakable. For a moment, nobody moves. And then, as if the spell is broken, a child starts crying because he wants to touch it. An old woman crosses herself. Someone faints. And you realize this isn't just fruit. This is spectacle. You've heard the rumors. In Barbados, pineapples grow so easily, children kick them like footballs. But here they're the stuff of legend. Samuel Pepys, the diarist, whose nose you'd know from across a market square, once wrote about tasting one. His verdict: a most delicious taste, but not so sweet as one might hope. Still, his envy at the host who provided it was palpable. It wasn't about the flavor. It was about having it. Back at your local tavern, the pineapple is all anyone can talk about. Did you see the skin, someone asks, tracing its diamond-patterned armor with a greasy finger in the air? They say the king has 5 of them. I heard he feeds them to his mistresses. No, he doesn't eat them, he plants them. It's for show. Even the landlord's in on it now. He's thinking of painting a pineapple on the pub sign. Not because he's selling them, mind you, but because he heard it attracts high-paying clientele. You suspect that's a myth, but honestly, at this point, who knows? You pass a pamphlet vendor selling woodcuts of the fruit. They've added a halo around it. You're not even surprised. Historians still argue whether the obsession began as an innocent appreciation of novelty or a calculated display of imperial superiority. After all, what says our navy is better than yours? Quite like shipping something halfway around the world just to not eat it. And so the pineapple gains ground, not through taste buds, but through eyeballs, through whispers, through sheer exotic allure. One fringe theory you overhear from an apprentice apothecary, over a shared meat pie no less, is that pineapples ward off bad humors. He says their smell purifies the air, which is very important in London's sooty, plague-scarred atmosphere. You nod along. Honestly, anything that doesn't smell like sewage and dead fish is probably medicinal by default here. You head home that night with a clear image burned in your mind, the pineapple in its straw bed catching the light like a holy relic. You're no longer sure if you want to eat one, but you definitely want people to think you have one. And as you drift off to sleep, listening to the sounds of hoofbeats on damp stone, you wonder quietly what kind of world turns fruit into status. You wake to gray light slanting through the shutters and the slow creak of carts starting their rounds. London is already humming with trade, and so is the price of pineapples climbing higher than ever. You've heard rumors that one single fruit sold last week for 60 shillings. That's more than you've paid for rent in 3 months. More than a decent suit. More than a year's pay for the boy who empties the chamber pots at the Duke of Somerset's manor. It makes no sense. It's not gold, it's not spice, it's not rare silk. It's perishable, prickly, slightly sweet and mostly sour, if not eaten immediately. Yet here it is outpricing real estate and keeping noblemen up at night. The truth is, no one knows exactly what it should cost, so it costs as much as someone is willing to pay. The fruit has no precedent in England. It's not an apple. It doesn't grow here. It's been through thousands of miles, storm-swept seas, and the occasional pirate skirmish to get here. And by the time it lands, everyone from the import merchant to the carriage boy wants a slice of its mystique. You overhear one gentleman mutter that he saw a banker's wife weep when her pineapple rotted before guests arrived. She had meant to display it for her husband's promotion banquet, but the sea voyage had been rough, and by the time it reached her parlor, the thing had softened. The servants had to bury it discreetly under the herb garden. The waste isn't what stings, it's the missed opportunity. Because pineapples aren't just pricey, they're social currency. They are invitations in botanical form. Owning one even briefly says something about you. It says you have connections in the colonies, or at least pretend to. It says you understand luxury. It says you can afford to let food rot for decoration, which is oddly the pinnacle of wealth. You aren't showing guests you can eat well. You're showing them you can afford not to. And so, in an oddly British way, the pineapple becomes a class signifier through deliberate inefficiency. At market stalls, boys are hired to guard shipments that might contain pineapples just in case. Some vendors start including decoy crates. To throw off the curious one says with a wink. One enterprising fellow in Whitechapel goes a step further and writes fake provenance scrolls. This pineapple, it claims in elaborate ink, was ripened on the east-facing slope of St. Kitts and kissed by the winds of Antigua before being blessed by a Jesuit priest. It's complete nonsense, but it adds to the value. You pass by a well-to-do merchant who's bragging loudly about the pineapple centerpiece on his wife's birthday table. You peer through the window. It's carved from wood and wax. The fact that you're still impressed speaks volumes. Historians are still trying to figure out whether the price surge was manipulated by a few key importers, or whether it truly was a natural economic oddity, an example of demand outstripping all logic. One fringe scholar even posits that the price of pineapples sparked early concepts of economic bubble theory, like tulips, or NFTs, but with more fruit flies. And here's where it gets stranger, nobody's even talking about the taste. No reviews, no recipes, no mentions of culinary delight. Because again, no one's eating them. They're too valuable for that. You hear that at one ball a man bit into a slice and was promptly ushered out blackballed from every invite list for the next year. What kind of man consumes the art, someone hissed. It's the edible equivalent of licking a Fabergé egg. Meanwhile, attempts to estimate value fluctuate wildly. Some say it's based on weight. Others insist it's the number of crowns on the top. More spikes, more prestige. One butcher claims it's about smell. He sniffs the fruit like a wine connoisseur and charges accordingly. You doubt his nose knows anything, but he's got customers lined up. Even the theater has caught the fever. A new comedy opens at the Globe called The Spiny King, about a poor farmer who inherits a pineapple and accidentally becomes royalty. You laugh once, genuinely, when the lead actor enters with one balanced on a cushion, bowed to by courtiers and choristers alike. But the humor feels slightly too real. Because deep down, everyone in London, rich or poor, knows the pineapple means something more than fruit. It's a symbol of distance, of empire, of control over things that don't belong, of displaying a tropical object on a frostbitten island and saying, yes, we brought this here. Look what we can do. And so the price climbs, and the stories spread, and you, despite knowing better, find yourself dreaming of someday holding one. Just once. Not eating it, of course not. Just holding it. It's 2 weeks later when you hear the news Lady Wrexham has acquired a pineapple, and it will be on display at her Wednesday dinner. You're not invited, but you know someone who is. And that someone owes you a favor involving a missing glove, a misplaced letter, and a dash through Cheapside during a storm. So naturally you cash it in. Wednesday arrives with a gray drizzle and the kind of low-hanging mist that clings to everything from lace collars to the backs of necks. You manage to tag along behind your friend as a carriage companion. A vague role no one questions because everyone is too busy worrying about their stockings and posture. The Wrexham estate is a 3-story townhouse with leaded glass windows and a floral crest etched into the door. But all of that pales the moment you walk in and see it. There, on a velvet pedestal, under glass. Centered in the grand parlor like a sacred relic in a cathedral. A pineapple. It's smaller than you expected again. The skin is mottled green and yellow with just a faint bloom of blue at the crown, like the fruit is shyly blushing from all the attention. A gold ribbon has been tied just beneath its leaves. People gather around it. They do not touch. No one even leans in too close. Instead, they murmur praise. It's symmetrical, says one. Remarkably preserved, offers another. My cousin's cousin had one once, but it rotted on the voyage. Someone makes a joke about guarding it like the crown jewels. Everyone chuckles politely. Then the footman brings around a silver tray. You think it might be time for a tasting. Perhaps finally the fruit will be served. But no. The tray holds miniature watercolor portraits of the pineapple for the guests to take home. You stifle a laugh, then a sneeze, which earns you several scandalized glances. You retreat to a far corner with a goblet of something vaguely wine-like and watch the room. People are doing what they always do, showing off, performing knowledge, performing restraint. Someone uses the word terroir. Someone else says acidity without ever having tasted pineapple in their life. And then you hear something curious. A young woman near the window whispers, "They rented it." What says her companion? She leans in. "It's not theirs. Came from a Dutch broker. They get it for 3 days, and then it goes to the Mayfords. They're hosting a poetry supper." You nearly choke on your drink. Historians would later confirm this wasn't uncommon. Pineapples were so rare and so expensive that a sort of black market lending library emerged among the merchant elite. You could rent a pineapple, for hours, for a night. Sometimes for a wedding portrait or a ball. A pineapple might tour 10 houses in a fortnight, passed like a Fabergé baton in a relay of ostentation. The fruit rarely made it to being eaten, and when it did, it was often slightly fermented. But who would admit that? You exit the Wrexham house, dazed, amused, and a little chilled. The fog has thickened. Gas lamps glow like distant fireflies. You can still smell the sweet, spiky scent of the fruit on your clothes. Back at your lodgings, you lie in bed thinking of the absurdity, of the way people bent over backwards to not eat something, how value once ascribed gains mass like a rolling snowball gathering, meaning it never deserved. Historians still debate whether the pineapple's rental economy helped fuel the rise of conspicuous consumption in England. Some say it's a symptom of global trade reaching domestic identity proof that what you own matters less than what you appear to own. Others think it's simply human folly, that we're easily hypnotized by novelty, especially when it's lumpy and vaguely resembles a pine cone wearing a crown. There's even a scholarly theory that the pineapple's symbolic weight was tied to England's uncertain place in global politics, that having a fruit from a far-off land displayed prominently in your drawing room was a quiet act of empire. You think about that as your eyes drift closed. And just before sleep comes, you smile at the thought of someone chasing their pineapple rental down the cobbled street at dawn cape, flapping footmen in tow, screaming, "Careful, it's still due back by noon." You don't expect to see a pineapple again so soon. But fortune, or perhaps folly, has other plans. A week later, you receive a hasty note scrawled in fountain ink on thick paper at Whitehall. The King. Pineapple. That's it. No signature, no explanation. Just the suggestion that His Royal Majesty Charles II himself is about to make a fruity public appearance. You skip lunch and head for the palace. The crowd outside Whitehall is already 20 deep. Gentlemen in lace cuffs, ladies with miniature spyglasses, a street poet muttering rhymes about the royal fruit in exchange for tuppence. You edge forward carefully, one elbow at a time, and there on the palace balcony, flanked by powdered courtiers and the gilded excesses of Restoration pageantry, stands Charles II, the merry monarch himself, looking surprisingly serious. In his gloved hands, raised like a sacred orb, is a pineapple. The crowd gasps. No one's sure what he's going to do. Eat it, throw it, declare war on France, using it as a metaphor. Instead, he gestures toward one of his gardeners, a wiry man with sun-worn skin and the look of someone who has wrestled with compost in 3 languages. This is John Rose, the royal horticulturist. The 2 men bow to each other. Then, very solemnly, Charles hands the pineapple over. It's theater, symbolic, but it works. You see it in the way the crowd stills, in the way people mutter the king grows his own. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. What matters is the image. You hear later that the pineapple wasn't even grown in England. It was imported as always, but placed in the palace greenhouse for a fortnight beforehand to establish plausible deniability. Royally ripened, someone calls it. Still, it sparks something. A new craze. If the king is growing pineapples, or pretending to, then the race is on. Nobles across the country begin building greenhouses. Not for oranges, not for grapes. For pineapples. You visit one such estate in Kent a month later. The lord of the house is proudly giving tours of his pinery. It smells like damp bricks, manure, and desperation. The structure itself is grand, a 2-story brick edifice with a vented roof and angled glass panels imported from Venice. Inside are wooden troughs filled with soil heated underneath by a network of flues, channeling warmth from coal-burning stoves. One guest whispers he's spent more on the greenhouse than the house. Another says he doesn't even like pineapple. It gives him ulcers. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that he could grow one. Eventually. Maybe. If the conditions are perfect and the stars align and the stoves don't explode. Historians agree that this era marked the birth of the British hothouse obsession. Not just with pineapples, but with exotic flowers, citrus, and eventually orchids. But it began quite squarely with that balcony moment. Charles II, John Rose. A passing of the spiky crown. You peer into one of the greenhouse corners where an undergardener has scribbled a pineapple with chalk on the brick wall. Next to it are tally marks, failed attempts. Only one real plant appears to be alive. It's small, pale, slightly deformed. The Lord beams with pride. Back in London, the gossip pages are ablaze. Duke's pineapple withers in frost, reads one. Countess builds new pinery, 10 servants sacked. Even satirical pamphlets appear. One features a cartoon of a pineapple on a throne, holding a scepter and frowning at Parliament. You chuckle at that. The fruit now holds political weight. Not everyone's amused, though. Some philosophers see the pineapple craze as a moral failing. Vanity in vegetable form, writes one. Others are more generous. Let them have their fruit, says a preacher during Sunday sermon. At least they're not declaring war over cheese again. Still, the attempts continue. You visit another garden, this one in Surrey, where a nobleman has constructed an elaborate mirror system to capture and reflect sunlight onto his prized pineapple plant. It looks like something from a mad astronomer's dream. One of the mirrors catches your eye just wrong and blinds you temporarily. You walk into a hedge. Later that evening, in a haze of mulled wine and overcooked lamb, someone proposes that the pineapple has become a form of courtship. You show someone your pinery, and if it impresses them, you discuss dowries. Someone else adds, if it doesn't, you grow mushrooms and marry for spite. You laugh too hard and snort wine up your nose. That night, in your modest bed, you imagine a future where pineapples grow everywhere in England, on windowsills, in flower boxes, hanging from lampposts like festive lanterns. It's ridiculous. And yet, you also imagine the king alone in his greenhouse peering down at a browning stalk and whispering, grow, you stubborn thing. Grow for England. You're sitting on a wooden stool at the edge of an artist's studio. When it happens, the pineapple enters the world of oil paint. It's perched delicately on a lacquered table, angled just so beneath the light from the tall north-facing window. Behind it, a powdered noblewoman stands with her chin tilted upward, the fabric of her silk gown shimmering faintly with each shift of the afternoon sun. Her hand hovers in the air, palm slightly open like she's about to present the fruit to the viewer, or receive it from some unseen figure just outside the frame. The artist, a thin, hollow-cheeked man with a streak of ultramarine on his cuff, grunts with satisfaction. Very good, he murmurs, nodding to himself as he drags a brush across canvas. Very fashionable. Very modern. He's not wrong. What was once only seen in ports and palace gardens is now entering drawing rooms through paint and imagination. Pineapples are the new favorite prop in portraiture. You see it again and again over the next few months. A baronet's daughter cradles one in her arms like a lamb. A merchant's wife leans beside one suggestively, the fruit placed carefully between her fan and her elbow. One ambitious young clerk commissions a portrait of himself, no wife, no children. Just him sitting stoically with a pineapple in his lap, as if daring anyone to ask where it came from. Art historians later debate the meaning of these choices. Were pineapples meant to symbolize trade? Fertility, colonial conquest? The divine order of global commerce? Or was it just trendy? You suspect the answer is yes, to all of it. The pineapple was versatile, at least in oil. It could mean whatever the patron wanted it to mean. A connection to the Americas. A nod to courtly sophistication. A subtle jab at a rival whose fruit had grown moldy. A wink to the viewer that whispered, "Look at me. Look what I have." Even more amusing are the portraits where the fruit doesn't quite belong. You visit the home of a self-made brewer who has had himself painted in Roman armor breastplate red cloak sandals, and at his feet, next to a trampled wine jug, rests a pineapple. It makes no sense, you point this out. That's the joke, he says proudly. Julius Caesar conquering the tropics. You nod and sip your ale. It's not a good joke, but the man has money, and the artist was paid, so who's to complain? Some artists go further. You attend a gallery opening hosted by a Baroque surrealist named Crispin Latchpole. One of his pieces depicts a dinner party where every guest's head is replaced by a pineapple peeling overripe leaking juice. He calls it Feast of Fools. You're not sure whether it's satire or self-portrait. Either way, you wake that night from a dream in which your own nose is a pineapple crown, and you can't smell anything but vinegar. The obsession continues to escalate. Rumors swirl about one portrait of the queen herself, never made public, where she holds a pineapple as a veiled jab at her husband's mistress, who famously failed to grow one in her estate greenhouse. True, impossible to confirm. Delicious to imagine. Absolutely. There's also the matter of fake portraits. You meet a man in a tavern who paints pineapples into old family paintings to make them appear more prestigious. For a fee, he'll restore your great-grandmother's likeness and tuck a pineapple on the windowsill behind her shoulder. A tasteful flourish, he calls it. He says business is booming. Historians today point to this period as the beginning of fruit as accessory. The pineapple replaced the miniature dog, the lace fan, the globe. Some say it even replaced the book. Why pose with a volume of Plato when you can pose with something that makes everyone ask, how on earth did they get that? And it's not just the wealthy. In poorer districts, copies of these portraits are sketched and copied and sold as broadsides. You see one pinned to a barber's wall, Lady Forthwith, and the glorious fruit. It's cheaply printed and slightly smudged, but still proudly displayed. You ask him about it. She's no one, he says. I made up the name, but they don't care. It's the fruit. You can't help but grin. Even in print, the pineapple retains its magic, or its mischief. And all the while, no one is eating them. You pass a baker who has crafted a marzipan version displayed in his window. It's not convincing, too smooth, too shiny, but children press their noses to the glass anyway. A sign reads 5 pence to smell. Someone has paid. That night, as you drift into dreams scented faintly of turpentine and sugar, you think back to the studio. The woman, the pose, the reverence. Not for herself, but for the fruit. You wonder if someday someone will paint a pineapple simply sitting in a bowl. No pageantry, no politics. Just fruit. Waiting to be eaten, but not tonight. Tonight it remains a crowned jewel of vanity. It begins as so many strange chapters do with a theft. You're at the Spitalfields market early one morning, hands in your coat pockets, eyeing a basket of bruised quinces when a sudden commotion draws your attention. A flurry of shouting, the clatter of boots on cobblestones. And then a boy, no more than 12, comes tearing through the crowd with something clutched to his chest. You catch only a glimpse as he flashes past, but it's enough. A pineapple. He's gone in seconds, disappearing down a side alley with the nimbleness of someone who's done this sort of thing before. Behind him, a puffing gentleman in a velvet coat wails like a widow at sea. My pineapple, my blessed spiny heirloom. You try not to laugh. You fail. This is the 3rd pineapple theft this week. The papers are calling it a crisis. Pineapple panic, declares the Morning Mercury. Fruit felons stalk the streets, shrieks another. You learn quickly that owning a pineapple now requires protection. Several estate owners have begun hiring fruit guards young men dressed in modest livery, with instructions to stand near the fruit at all times during public functions. One even carries a small stick, just in case someone tries to sniff too forcefully, he explains solemnly. The paranoia isn't entirely unjustified. Just last month, a would-be suitor snuck into a lady's parlor and licked her pineapple as a gesture of romantic defiance. She fainted. He was exiled to Wales. The fruit was discarded immediately along with the chaise lounge it had touched. The social consequences of pineapple mishandling are enormous. You hear whispers of an underground fruit market, pineapples changing hands in candlelit cellars, wrapped in velvet, traded like diamonds. One man claims his cousin's friend lost his inheritance in a card game and had to relinquish his family pineapple as collateral. Theft, after all, is only the tip of the rind. Some of the more cautious elite have begun keeping decoy pineapples, realistic fakes made of wax or papier-mâché. These are displayed publicly, while the real fruit is hidden in a locked box in the pantry under the watchful eye of a servant who likely resents every minute. One satirical play you attend, The Pineapple Plot, features a scene where a man proposes to his beloved, only to discover that the pineapple he's gifted her is a forgery. She breaks off the engagement. The audience roars. Behind you, someone mutters, "Too real, that one." Historians continue to debate whether the security theater around pineapples was more about theft or reputation. One fringe theory suggests that some thefts were staged deliberate spectacles to enhance the fruit's perceived value. After all, nothing becomes more desirable than that which others are seen desperately trying to steal. You hear about an apothecary who now bottles pineapple panic tonic, claiming it eases the nerves of those who live in households with the fruit. It's mostly brandy and nutmeg. Still, it sells out daily. One woman is reportedly suing her neighbor for scent infringement, accusing her of wafting artificial pineapple essence through an open window to gain social points. "My guests thought she had one," she sobs in court. They left before dessert. Even the clergy are getting involved. One vicar sermonizes against the false idol of the tropics, warning parishioners that the fruit is a temptation to vanity and criminal impulse. He's later seen at a garden party sniffing one behind a hedgerow. The absurdity is contagious. You meet a retired colonel who claims to sleep with his pineapple in a locked trunk. "They'll not take her," he growls, patting the case. He doesn't elaborate on why the pineapple is female. You don't ask. Theft or no pineapples are now considered too dangerous to be left unattended. You're invited to a small supper where the hostess has hired a cellist and a fruit minder. The former plays gentle minuets. The latter stands behind the pineapple arms, crossed eyes, scanning the guests like a hawk with a monocle. Naturally, you ask if he's available for weddings, and still no one eats them. Because even stolen, they're worth more untouched. Licking, sniffing, painting fine, but biting. That's practically destruction of property. You pass by a pawn shop one evening where a sign reads, "We do not buy fruit." You suspect there's a story behind that. Back in your rooms, you dream of a world where apples cost hundreds and bananas come with insurance plans. You wake with the distinct feeling that somewhere in London, a man is being interrogated for trying to sell a wax pineapple with a bite mark. And you're probably right. You're sipping a weak broth in the corner of a modest tavern in Southwark when you overhear the most delightful phrase, "Mine's real. I keep it under glass." The speaker is a short, red-faced man in a mustard-colored coat, gesturing grandly over a slice of veal. His companions nod solemnly as though he's just claimed ownership of Excalibur. You eavesdrop shamelessly. He describes in vivid detail the measures he's taken to protect his fruit. Custom bell jar, imported from Murano, leaded base, etched crown motif, locked cabinet. I only remove it for portraits and then only with gloves. Someone asks if they can see it. "Oh no," he replies quickly, "it's strictly appointment only." You stifle a chuckle and finish your broth. It seems you've stumbled upon another of London's growing obsessions, pineapple containment. Thefts, after all, are just one problem. The bigger threat is decay. A pineapple once plucked is doomed. Time, gravity, and humidity are cruel enemies. And in 17th century London, preservation is, let's say, creative. The first method is obvious glass. You visit a cabinet maker in Bloomsbury who specializes in fruit displays. "Pineapples are my bread and butter," he says proudly, polishing a walnut case lined with red velvet. Keeps out the mice. And the neighbors. He offers you a catalog, the gentle person's guide to fruit presentation, filled with sketches of cloches stands and lockable frames. One design includes a discreet drawer for incense sticks. To keep the scent strong, he explains. You then meet a widow who swears by cold storage. I place mine in a wine cellar between 2 stone jars of butter, she says. Rot slows if it thinks it's surrounded by cheese. You nod solemnly, though the science seems suspect. Historians later note that these preservation attempts were rarely successful. Still, they offered the illusion of control, which, as always, is the real currency. Things escalate further when you attend a soirée hosted by the eccentric Earl of Dorchester. His pineapple is mounted on a slowly spinning pedestal, turned by a clockwork mechanism and illuminated by a ring of tallow candles behind stained glass. It glows like a saint. Guests stand in line to see it. One woman fans herself furiously and murmurs, "I feel faint." Another man proposes on the spot. To the woman, thankfully not the fruit. Still, you can't help but wonder. One footman tells you his master orders regular polishings. Not of the glass, of the fruit. With what you ask. A special wax blend, he whispers. From the Indies. And duck fat. You try not to look horrified. You fail. Meanwhile, artists have begun sketching preservation setups as status symbols. You see an etching titled The Vigil, featuring a nobleman seated beside his pineapple cabinet, with a candle and a watch as if guarding the tomb of a saint. Satirists have a field day. One popular pamphlet, A Fruitful Night's Dream, describes a man who wakes to find his pineapple has developed a second crown and begun speaking in Latin. I am the king of fruit, it hisses. Bow to me. Sales skyrocket. Even poets get involved. You read one sonnet that begins, O thorny jewel, you gilded orb of sun, encased in glass, yet ripening undone. It's dreadful, but you recite it anyway. And all of this, these efforts to freeze time to stall, rot, to defy the very biology of the pineapple, comes down to one simple truth. Nobody wants to be the one who loses their fruit. If it softens, you are shamed. If it molds, you are mocked. If it collapses into itself like a fallen soufflé, you are ruined. It's not just a fruit. It's a social litmus test. Historians still debate whether this marked the earliest cultural transition from perishable luxury to symbolic permanence. Some argue the pineapple was England's first viral status object, meant not for use, but for continuous display under layers of protection that grew more elaborate by the year. There's even a theory that certain households never actually owned one, but claimed their pineapple was away in storage, or undergoing fumigation. The fruit equivalent of my yachts being detailed. You can't prove it, but you believe it. One night, after too much port and a strange fish pie, you dream of walking into a drawing room where 100 pineapples sit under bell jars, each guarded by a child in livery. They blink in unison. One breathes. You wake up thirsty. You're halfway through a lukewarm meat pie at a gathering in Covent Garden when someone leans over the table and asks, Have you seen the greenhouse at Syon Park? You blink. The one with the camellias. He scoffs. Camellias number the pineapple house. And just like that, you're off. The coach to Syon Park is slow drawn by 2 horses who seem to resent the entire notion of work. But by mid-morning, you're stepping through tall gates onto the sprawling estate of a man whose name you can't pronounce, but whose pineapples apparently are legendary. The greenhouse isn't a house, really. It's a fortress. A domed conservatory of brick and glass bristling with copper pipes and topped with a wind vane shaped like, yes, a pineapple. The air inside hits you like a soft wall, warm, damp, earthy. It smells of compost and coal smoke, and the faintest sweetness like a kitchen moments after jam has been made. You're led around by a gardener who has clearly rehearsed this tour. 24 troughs, he explains, gesturing to long wooden beds filled with dark soil. Manure-fired hotbeds below replaced every fortnight. Ventilation controlled by this pulley system. And here he pauses dramatically our oldest fruit. Nearly 10 months on the stalk. You lean in. It's underwhelming. Small. Yellow-green. A little lopsided. But the pride in the man's voice is unmistakable. We've kept it alive through frost fog and 3 outbreaks of flu in the staff dormitories. We lost a footman to mildew, well his pride anyway. You nod solemnly. The quest to grow pineapples in England's damp, unpredictable climate has turned into something of a national preoccupation. Newspapers run columns on greenhouse maintenance. Pinery wars erupt between nobles, each claiming superior horticultural technique. There are whisper networks of manure traders. A black market for tropical ash. You attend a lecture where a gentleman in a cravat and pince-nez gives a 2-hour speech titled, "On the Manipulation of Solar Radiance Through Angled Glass in the Encouragement of Exotic Fruit." You leave halfway through, but not before someone passes around a jar of pineapple-scented soil enhancer. There's even a musical composition making the rounds, the Pineapple Gavotte, written in honor of a duke whose plant allegedly produced fruit twice in one season. The veracity is disputed, but the melody is undeniably catchy. Still, most attempts fail. At a dinner party in Richmond, you're introduced to Lady Beresford, who confesses that after 6 months of effort, her entire pinery produced a single fruit the size of a walnut. She had it gilded, and now wears it on a necklace. "It cost me £12 and a bout of trench foot," she says proudly. Some methods border on the unhinged. One baronet feeds his pineapple goat's milk via a sponge in the soil. Another pipes in violin music, claiming the fruit responds to Vivaldi. A widow in Bath swears by hourly readings of psalms. Pineapple prefers calm, she says. No shouting, no sudden movements, like a duchess with roots. Historians remain fascinated by the extent of this agricultural arms race. Some suggest it marks the beginning of England's fascination with mastering nature through architecture greenhouses as control chambers. Others see it as a proto-Victorian mania for tinkering, measuring, and gently panicking over mold. One fringe theory even suggests the pineapple craze influenced the design of the Crystal Palace, though that's mostly based on shape. Back at Scion Park, you ask the gardener whether they plan to eat the fruit when it ripens. He looks horrified. "Eat it, eat it. My dear, we're having it cast in plaster first, then painted, then archived, and suddenly it clicks. This was never about the taste. It's about cultivation. Not of fruit, but of myth. You don't grow a pineapple for pleasure. You earn one. You suffer for it. You coax it, baby. It curse at it under your breath, and when it finally sprouts small and sour, though it may be, you don't consume it. You consecrate it." You leave Scion Park with a complimentary pamphlet titled Hotbeds and Humility, a layman's guide to the domestic pineapple, and a faint sense that Britain might just collectively lose its mind before the century's out. As your coach rattles back toward London, you imagine a future where pineapple growing is an Olympic sport, where pinery inspectors hold clipboards, where the fruit gets its own column in the Times. And the scariest part, you wouldn't mind reading it. It's the first week of December when the rains come and keep coming. The Thames is swollen and brown boots squelch with every step, and your stockings haven't been dry in days. Yet amid the soggy gloom, the pineapple craze refuses to wilt. You find yourself at a winter gathering in a townhouse off Fleet Street. The ceilings are low, the punch is sharp, and the talk is of rot. 3 gone in a week, mutters a man in a crushed velvet waistcoat, holding his drink like a funeral shroud. All mush before Christmas. Another adds, "My sister's pinery flooded. Her fruit dissolved. Dissolved. Like a forgotten trifle." You sip your watered wine and nod gravely. The truth is, England was never meant to host pineapples. The soil is wrong. The sun is wrong. The air itself seems to resent the attempt. But no one dares admit it. Instead, they battle nature with increasing desperation. One earl commissions a roof entirely of angled mirrors to funnel light onto his plants. It blinds 3 servants and causes a fire. Another duchess hires a team of chimney sweeps to clean her flue-heated hotbeds daily. "I will not lose another fruit to mildew," she snarls into her sherry. You meet a horticulturist who speaks in hushed tones about cold drafts of death. He shows you a pineapple wrapped in wool, sitting beside a heated brick, both tucked inside a wooden box lined with rabbit fur. "This one's made it 6 months," he says. He's called Percival. You don't ask why the fruit has a name. You already know. Still, the sogginess wins more often than not. A pamphlet circulates with helpful drawings, signs of impending pineapple demise. Soft spots, leaf, droop, fragrance, decline, spiritual malaise. You see one in a shop window, annotated with little skulls. Someone has scrawled beneath it, "Farewell, Montague. We barely knew thee." Historians later argue that this constant tension between the will to preserve and the inevitability of rot embodied the very heart of restoration anxiety. Nothing could last. Not governments, not alliances, not wigs, and certainly not fruit. You attend a funeral of sorts. A banker's wife, whose pinery had been the envy of Clapham, invites close friends to witness the burial of her final pineapple. It had turned black at the base and begun to collapse inward, as if embarrassed. She wears black. The fruit lies in a satin-lined box. A pianist plays something soft and watery. There are canapes. I just couldn't throw it away, she whispers. You pat her shoulder. He had a good season. She nods, eyes damp. We were going to paint it next week. You hear of another case far less poetic, a merchant's greenhouse so overcome with mold that he burned it to the ground and started over. New soil, new slate, he declares. This time I'll boil the manure. Your favorite anecdote, though, comes from a cook. She tells you that in secret she once rescued a rotting pineapple from her employer's compost heap. Not all bad, she says, winking. I trimmed the soft bits, soaked it in rum, and baked it in a pie. Served it to the footmen. You raise an eyebrow. They wept, she adds. Didn't know why. Just said it tasted like summer and victory. You decide then and there that pineapple is less fruit and more fable. Every house has a different strategy. Some blame the wood in their greenhouses. Others consult astrologers. My moon is in mold, laments one nobleman. One particularly creative pamphlet claims pineapple rot is caused by doubtful thoughts. Do not think about failure, it advises sternly. The fruit can sense it. Even the king is not immune. A rumor spreads that Charles II's prize pineapple developed an odd white film and was quietly removed during a garden party. He had it replaced mid-toast, one courtier whispers. No one noticed. The speech continued. The queen never blinked. It may not be true, but it feels true. And yet, despite the weather, the failures, the sheer absurdity, people persevere. Because to give up would be to admit defeat. To admit England cannot conquer the tropics, cannot bend the sun, or master the steam. And so they build, replant, repaint, regrow. You fall asleep that night listening to the soft drip of water from your ceiling, and imagine a nation full of half-dead pineapples, all tucked into little beds, each being sung lullabies by hopeful aristocrats in damp slippers. You're sitting in a cramped kitchen behind a tavern in Clerkenwell, picking through a questionable plate of boiled eggs and pickled onions, when a scullery maid leans in and whispers, You ever had pineapple in anything? You pause mid-chew. She grins. My cousin cooks for a bishop. Tried to serve a pineapple tart last Sunday. Ended up in tears. Bishop said it tasted like a garden accident. You nearly choke laughing. Until now, pineapples have lived on windowsills and paintings behind glass, or in the pages of society gossip. But slowly, very slowly, the idea of actually eating one starts to take hold. It begins as curiosity. Some are tired of the theater. A few brave or foolish souls decide to slice into their expensive trophies. Just a nibble, they whisper. One polite wedge, but the results are mixed. You hear from a merchant who served slivers of pineapple with salt pork. Made the pork angry, he says darkly. A lady from Mayfair tried a preserve, but described it as like chewing sugared bracken. Another had it boiled with eel. That report is redacted in polite conversation. The biggest issue you learn is timing. Pineapples shipped from the colonies arrive underripe, overripe, or injured. Often bruised. Never perfect. They travel weeks in wooden crates jostled in storms packed next to tobacco fish barrels, or something worse. By the time they land in London, they've survived in body, but not in flavor. You hear of a chef who boils the fruit in honey, rosemary, and wine, then serves it with duck. It's edible. A poet reviews it in verse. The last line reads, The bird sang, the fruit sulked. Despite these setbacks, culinary ambition intensifies. You visit the home of a viscount who's hosted what he calls a tropical banquet. There are candied guava roasted plantain, and yes, pineapple flambé. You arrive just in time to witness the fire brigade being summoned. Too much brandy, someone mutters. Or not enough supervision. The pineapple survives. The tablecloth does not. Historians later reflect on this period as England's first faltering attempt at fusion cuisine. They'll cite menus in which pineapples were paired with game meats, custards, and even beer. Pineapple beer. You try a mug at a local fair. It's deeply unpleasant. Like drinking a sock filled with vinegar and regret. Still, people persist. Cooks get clever. One bakes pineapple into dense fruitcakes, hiding the sourness behind raisins and cloves. Another slices it thin and dries it over the hearth like exotic jerky. One famously soaks it in gin, waits 3 days, and calls it a colonial cordial. You try that one. You don't remember much after the second sip except that you hugged a curtain and declared it your oldest friend. Meanwhile, debates rage in fashionable circles. Should the pineapple be sweet or savory? Fresh or preserved? Served raw or roasted? A food or a fragrance? You attend a heated salon argument where one woman insists the pineapple must never be eaten, as it destroys the mystery. Another counters that mystery is overrated, especially when one has molars. Your own view shifts when you attend a modest supper with a retired sea captain. He tells stories of Barbados of pineapples so juicy they split open under their own weight, served with grilled fish and sour tamarind. Here we dress them like queens and let them rot, he says. He serves you a bowl of pineapple slices chilled in river stones and salt water. It's perfect. You sit in stunned silence as the flavor melts on your tongue, bright, sharp, honey-sweet alive. You whisper that was worth the price of a greenhouse. He laughs. No greenhouse, just timing. Back in London, the experience haunts you. It changes how you see the pineapple. Not as a symbol, not as a painting, but as something living, brief, beautiful, devourable. Still, you're in the minority. Most continue the tradition of not eating their pineapples, even those who dare rarely say so aloud. There's social risk in reducing something rare to pulp, in admitting you turned a museum piece into jam. One wag sums it up best at a market stall. You eat a pineapple, it's gone. You display it, and it haunts the neighbors for months. And yet, the idea has been planted. You start to hear whispers at bakeries behind tavern doors, among apprentice chefs. New methods, fresh pairings, cautious courage. The fruit is still feared, still precious. But at last someone is licking the knife. The first time someone tells you that pineapples might prevent plague, you're ankle deep in Thames mud trying to retrieve your boot. A butcher, ruddy-faced, waving a turkey leg, shouts it across the road. It's the acid I heard clears the air, keeps the bad humors out. You raise an eyebrow. You sure you're not thinking of lemons? He shrugs. Fruit's fruit in it. And just like that, another layer of superstition wraps itself around the pineapple. You notice it first in the apothecaries. Bottles labeled Ananas purificatus line the shelves, promising everything from breath sweetening to bubonic resistance. Most are vinegar sugar and the faintest suggestion of fruit. Still, they sell out daily. Then come the pomander's little mesh balls carried on chains filled with herbs and spices to cleanse the air. Some now boast pineapple oil, though what this truly is remains unclear. You sniff one. It smells like burnt sugar and cellar mold. You buy it anyway. It's fashionable. One pamphlet claims pineapples emit invisible tropical vapors that ward off death. Another argues their divine geometry, those spiraled eyes, channels celestial order. A third, anonymously printed, insists that pineapples vibrate at a morally righteous frequency. You pass a preacher shouting on a street corner, "As the fruit is upright and crowned, so too must we be. The pineapple is God's compass." He gets heckled by a fruit seller. Then God's compass rots after a week. The crowd laughs, but the preacher isn't alone. Households begin placing pineapples in windows, not just for prestige, but for protection. To keep the pestilence at bay, says a matron in Holborn. We've had no coughing since it arrived. Her cook mutters it's because the whole house reeks of cloves and anxiety. You hear of a school that hangs a painted pineapple above the door. No child has died since a teacher exclaims, "The school's only 3 months old." No one mentions this. Meanwhile, the more desperate measures emerge. One man shaves bits of dried pineapple into his pipe tobacco. Another hangs a garland of pineapple slices above his bed, swearing it calms his humors. No night sweats in weeks, he beams. His wife rolls her eyes. Even midwives join the trend. A young mother tells you her birth was overseen by a woman who waved a pineapple slice over her belly while whispering something in broken Latin. The child came out fast, she says. And fragrant. You don't ask what fragrant means in this context. Historians still argue about the pineapple's role in 17th century health culture. Some believe it marked a broader shift in how Londoners viewed foreign imports, not just as curiosities, but as talismans. Others claim it was all marketing fruit sellers exploiting fear, much like peddlers of plague rings and beaver oil tonics. But there's no denying the pineapple took on new meaning. You attend a dinner party where the centerpiece is surrounded by sprigs of rosemary and rue, classic plague herbs. When asked why, the host responds, "Just doubling our chances." One man claims he slept with a pineapple on his chest during an outbreak. Felt protected, he says. Also sticky. Some go further. In Smithfield, a doctor charges 2 guineas for tropical inhalations. Patients sit in a curtained booth where allegedly heated pineapple steam is funneled toward their nostrils. You sneak a look behind the curtain. It's just hot water and orange peel. Still, the line is around the block. Satirists respond in kind. You spot a cartoon showing death at a market stopped by a pineapple floating in mid-air, a holy aura around it. Caption, "Not today. Spiky savior." Even Parliament gets involved. A bill is proposed to fund colonial greenhouses to encourage domestic pineapple growth in the name of public health. It does not pass. But it gets read, which is shocking enough. In quieter corners, people admit they don't know what they believe. You meet an old widow who keeps a carved wooden pineapple by her bed. "It reminds me to breathe," she says. And sometimes that's all I need. Back in your room, you stare at the pineapple-shaped ink blotter you impulse bought last week. It smells faintly of varnish. You breathe in. You feel fine. You drift off, imagining a city bathed in tropical air. Every sill a shrine. Every alley a little safer. Every sniff of pineapple a whispered ward against fate. It's nonsense, probably. But in a place like London, where smoke coils through the lungs and fear hangs heavier than fog, even nonsense can feel like medicine. The invitation arrives on thick vellum hand-delivered by a courier who smells faintly of soap and cinnamon. You unseal it carefully. The wax bears the mark of House Willoughby, and the script looped and florid reads. You are warmly invited to an evening of scent and sensation. Theme, the tropics. You sigh. It's another pineapple party. But this one is different. You arrive just after twilight, your cloak damp with fog, and are ushered through tall oak doors into a grand receiving hall bathed in candlelight. The air hits you immediately warm, humid, and undeniably strange. It's the scent, not of rose water or orange peel or wood smoke. No tonight smells of pineapple. You blink and look around. Everywhere candles, sachets, simmering pots behind potted palms, smells of that now familiar sweet acidity. The scent hangs in the air like a promise or a challenge. You pass a table of fragrant cards, pineapple and amber tropical musk spiced crown. A footman offers you a small bottle labeled Son of Antigua. You sniff. It smells like sugared citrus and very distant horses. The hostess appears resplendent in a gown that seems to shimmer like wet mango skin. "We call it immersion," she says grandly. "Close your eyes and you're no longer in London." You do. You're still in London. But credit where due, it's the best-smelling room you've been in all month. Over dinner, conversation swirls around pineapple perfumes and pineapple soaps. A guest claims that Parisian perfumers are crafting tropical notes into high-society colognes. Another swears that her cousin's dog wore a pineapple-scented ribbon, and now commands more affection than the vicar. You overhear a composer describe a new overture ananas in G minor. Inspired by the scent, he says, tapping his nose. Not the flavor. Never the flavor. You're offered pineapple hand lotion, pineapple gloves, a small pineapple-shaped pomade box. One gentleman proudly reveals his snuff tin enameled imported and filled with the essence of spiny gold. You try a pinch. It burns like betrayal and lemonade. Still, you understand the appeal. In a city that smells of coal, cabbage, and chamber pots, the crisp tang of pineapple is intoxicating. It doesn't matter that it's fake. What matters is that it transports. Historians will later note that pineapple-scented goods marked the shift from fruit as object to fruit as idea. A thing didn't need to be a pineapple, it merely needed to smell like one. You hear whispers of a man who sells tropical mists in glass atomizers. One spritz above the bed each morning, and your dreams turn to coral shores and palm trees. Guaranteed to banish melancholia, he promises. Or your melancholy back. Even the apothecaries cash in. You stop by one near Bow Street that offers pineapple tonics for temperament fragrance for fatigue. The recipe: apple cider vinegar, sugar water, a slice of lemon, and a prayer. You buy 2. Back at home, you realize your coat carries the ghost of tonight's air. You hang it near the hearth, and the scent lingers soft, strange, oddly comforting. And then the dreams start. Not vivid, not frightening, just strange. You find yourself walking through forests that smell like tea shops. Markets where every item is shaped like a pineapple. A postman with pineapple buttons delivers a letter made of fruit rind. In one dream you eat a slice. You wake confused and happy. And for days after, everything you eat tastes faintly sweeter. Of course the cynics emerge. Satirical prints appear with titles like The Scent of Stupidity or The Olfactory Empire Strikes Again. One features a man drowning in a vat of pineapple cologne, weeping. At least I'll die fashionable. You laugh, but you still keep the sachet under your pillow. Because you've realized something. Pineapple in scent at least is safe. You can't bruise it, can't spoil it, can't drop it on the stairs and scandalize the neighbors. You can carry it in your pocket, on your wrist, in your hair. You can wear its dream. And in a world of damp winters, sour bread, and muddy boots, that dream is worth bottling. It's a crisp morning in March when you step into a print shop just off Bishopsgate, hoping to find a new ink blotter and possibly a less judgmental notebook. What you find instead is laughter deep contagious and spilling out of the back room. You peek behind a curtain. 5 men huddle around a broadsheet snorting into their tea. The page is covered in pineapples. Fat ones, drooping ones. Pineapples wearing crowns, monocles, and boots. The headline, The Spiny Menace Returns. You've found London's latest obsession, pineapple satire. It had to happen. For months, no years now, the fruit has been treated like royalty medicine myth. But now the pendulum swings the other way. Londoners are finally laughing at the absurdity. You purchase the broadsheet, smuggle it under your coat like contraband, and read it over breakfast. There's a poem titled Ode to a Fruit I Cannot Afford. A cartoon depicting Parliament with pineapples for heads. At least one of them's fresh reads the caption. A serialized drama, The Pining Pineapple, in which a nobleman falls in love with his own fruit and is sent to Bedlam. It's glorious. Even the titles are a joy. Fruitless ambitions, a prickly affair, the rot beneath the crown. You nearly choke on your toast. As satire blooms, so does scorn. Pineapples become the favorite metaphor for excess vanity and idiocy. At one coffee house, a new rule is posted. No fruit lords or their poets beyond this point. A playwright releases a farce about a duchess who builds an entire greenhouse for one fruit, only to discover it's a disguised artichoke. It's a hit. You hear of a masked ball where the theme is exotic madness. Dozens arrive dressed as pineapples. One man simply wears a sign, I was going to be a pineapple, but I ran out of money and self-respect. Critics grow bolder. A philosopher named Dr. Hambridge writes an essay titled The Tyranny of Tropical Fruit, in which he argues that society has lost its way, that a fruit should not command more reverence than a newborn child. It's dramatic. It sells out. Even playwrights who once sang pineapple praises now turn. You attend a biting satire called The Golden Prickle, in which a vain merchant spends his life chasing a single pineapple across oceans, loses everything, and in the final scene bites into it, only to discover it's hollow. You cry, from laughter, and perhaps a little recognition. Historians later reflect on this moment as a cultural tipping point. The fruit had risen so high, so irrationally, that mockery was inevitable. The satire didn't kill the pineapple's prestige, but it certainly dented the bell jar. Still, the fruit fights back. After one particularly vicious cartoon shows a pineapple weeping atop a pile of coins, a nobleman retaliates by hosting a serious pineapple appreciation salon. Guests read poetry aloud to the fruit. One woman sings. A man plays a lute. A pamphlet titled Defending the Dignity of Fruit makes the rounds, urging Londoners to resist mockery and embrace majesty. No one takes it seriously. You see a child on the street dragging a melon painted to look like a pineapple. He calls it His Grace Lord Fruiton. It's wearing a wig, and still satire becomes mainstream. Merchants name pies arrogant pineapple. Taverns serve spiny ales with intentionally sour notes. A man on Tower Hill claims to have trained a parrot to squawk too dear whenever someone mentions the fruit. Your favorite moment. You see a street performer balancing a pineapple on his head while reciting Hamlet backwards. When asked why, he replies, to prove I'm less ridiculous than this fruit. You tip him a shilling, because for all its glory, its symbolism, its scent and scandal, the pineapple has now done something truly noble. It's brought the whole city together in laughter. And in a place like London, where plague politics and puddles compete for dominance, that's no small thing. The trouble begins with a knock at the back door of a pastry shop. A boy, freckled, wild-eyed, arrives panting, clutching a basket shrouded in blue linen. He pulls back the cloth with a dramatic flourish and whispers, "It's real, straight from the docks. Didn't even touch customs." The baker leans in. Beneath the linen is a pineapple firm golden still glistening from its journey. A deal is struck. By sunset, that same pineapple sits in the window of the shop with a velvet ribbon tied round its crown and a hand-painted sign, "Genuine imported pineapple, limited viewing hours, no touching." And just like that, you witness the start of London's pineapple hoax epidemic. It spreads quickly. A tailor on Bond Street claims to have imported a pineapple personally from a little-known island off the coast of Tobago, which turns out to be made of wax and filled with cloves. A bookseller in Soho offers pineapple-scented parchments, which are just perfumed orange peel. You see a cobbler selling tropical insoles. You don't ask. The city becomes awash with faux fruit, and nobody knows what's real anymore. You visit a florist who insists her centerpiece is fresh. You tap it. It echoes. One doctor claims his fruit can sing when properly warmed. You attend a demonstration. The pineapple remains stubbornly silent. Even the king's own kitchen is caught in scandal when a servant swaps the royal centerpiece with a wooden replica for practice polishing. For 2 days, dignitaries toast its beauty. When the truth comes out, the servant is reassigned to spoon-washing for eternity. Historians argue later whether this was England's first full-fledged fruit fraud wave. The lines between illusion and prestige blur so completely that it no longer matters if a pineapple is real as long as it seems expensive. Enter the pineapple rental racket. You track down one of the city's most notorious fruit brokers. He wears a fur-trimmed cape and carries a ledger thicker than a Bible. He explains his business model: hourly rates for display, extra charge for artistically imperfect blemishes, which make it look more real. Optional delivery, in velvet-lined boxes, with footmen in matching waistcoats. He even has contracts. 3-hour minimum. Damage surcharge if anyone actually eats it. You ask how many pineapples he actually owns. He smirks. 2. But I have 10 in circulation. You realize the same fruit has been in 5 parties, 3 portraits, and 1 fainting spell. You're both horrified and impressed. Theatrical societies get involved. One comedy group stages The Return of the False Fruit, a play in which a nobleman must identify the real pineapple from a group of lookalikes or lose his estate. The crowd votes. The nobleman always fails. Satirical prints flood the stalls. One shows a pineapple peeling itself to reveal it's a turnip underneath. Another depicts 2 ladies sword-fighting over a pineapple that's actually a hedgehog in disguise. Your favorite is titled The Fruit That Lied, a dramatic rendering of a wax pineapple, whispering to a crowd, "I was never yours." Still, some take it too far. You hear of a courtship dissolved after it was revealed that a man had proposed beside a fake pineapple. The bride's family declared it a symbol of false intentions. He now sells pickled onions in Spitalfields. The newspapers call it Pineapple Gate. You call it Tuesday. And yet amid the chaos, there's something freeing. A sense that the pineapple's reign has shifted from sacred to absurd, from display piece to cultural meme. It no longer needs to be eaten or grown or even real. It just needs to provoke, and provoke it does. At a music recital, a woman wears a pineapple hat. At a poetry reading, a man reads his verses to a wax fruit in a rocking chair. You attend a lecture where a scholar solemnly debates whether the idea of pineapple is now more powerful than the object itself. You nod along. You're not sure what it means, but you agree, because deep down you know the truth. London never feared pineapples because of their price or their foreignness or their fleeting freshness. London feared pineapples because they were mirrors reflecting everything absurd, ambitious, and slightly unhinged in the people who chased them. And no wax replica, no fake scent, no painted rind can change that. You're halfway through your morning walk boots, muddy coffee lukewarm, when a man in a plum-colored waistcoat nearly runs you over with a wheelbarrow full of coconuts. Out of the way he barks. Pineapples are out. You watch him vanish down the street, coconuts jostling, and realize something strange is afoot. By week's end, it's undeniable the pineapple is no longer king. At first, it's subtle. The fruit disappears from a few drawing rooms. A noble woman has her pineapple sculpture quietly replaced with a Roman bust. A shop known for pineapple-embroidered gloves now offers tropical neutrality, ambiguous leaves, no spikes. Then come the whispers. Too sour, someone says at a dinner party. Never understood, the fuss says another. Bananas, mutters a third with the conviction of someone announcing a coup. Bananas. You scoff. You laugh, and then you see them. In a shop window on Cheapside, a large bunch of golden bananas arranged artfully on a velvet cushion. A sign beneath reads, "The civilized fruit, soft, elegant, digestible." The banana, of all things, is making a play for the crown. You think it's a joke until you see a poet reading ode to appeal so subtle. Then a painter showcasing still life with bananas and regret. Then a cook selling banana custard tarts that melt like velvet. The city is shifting. At an apothecary, you hear a man say, "The pineapple cures nothing, but the banana soothes." You don't even know what that means, but you find yourself nodding. Historians later write that this shift was inevitable. Pineapples were too sharp, too complicated, too tiring. They demanded attention space, temperature control, velvet gloves. Bananas. They just showed up. Soft, yellow, reliable. Some call it fruit fatigue. Others say it's post-symbolism disillusionment. You call it London being London. The satire evolves. A new cartoon shows a pineapple in a wig weeping into a banana peel. Another shows a pineapple melting in a corner while bananas dance by candlelight. The caption, "Yesterday's crown, today's compost." Even the perfumers pivot. You walk into your usual shop and find your favorite pineapple oil discontinued. In its place, essence of banana and mellow peel number 3. You sniff. It smells like dessert and rain. You buy 2. You overhear someone say, "At least bananas aren't smug." Someone else sighs. They don't need a greenhouse. At a gala, a duchess appears wearing a banana-shaped brooch. Her rivals gasp. One lady faints. Another pulls out her pineapple fan and snaps it shut with finality. You think of all the wax pineapples, the portraits, the thefts, the sniffing scandals. All the money, sweat, poetry, jealousy. All the greenhouses burning in the name of something no one dared to eat. And now, replaced by a fruit you can mash with a spoon. But here's the odd thing, there's no uproar, no resistance, just relief. As if everyone was waiting for the madness to end. You visit a garden once famous for its pinery. The beds are overgrown, the glass cracked. A single banana plant grows in the corner, unbothered by climate or politics. The groundskeeper shrugs. Less trouble. And suddenly you understand the pineapple was never about the pineapple. It was about what it let people believe. That they were rare, important, exotic, chosen. But belief is a delicate thing. It bruises, and it doesn't keep well in damp weather. So the city moves on. Some cling, of course. You spot a solitary pineapple at a gallery dusty defiant. A broadsheet runs a last impassioned essay in defense of spines. But the tide has turned. And you? You sit in your room that evening, peel a banana, and chew slowly, thoughtfully. It's soft, familiar, slightly sweet. No spectacle, no pressure, just fruit. It's past midnight when the whisper reaches you. You're sipping tepid tea at a card table in a dimly lit back room of a gentleman's club near Chancery Lane, half listening to a debate about French wine tariffs, when someone leans over and says, "Have you heard about the pineapple house in Dunmore?" You blink. What another greenhouse? He shakes his head. Not in the shape of a pineapple, shaped like one. A whole tower. You stare. You're drunk. He shrugs. Probably, but it's real. And he's right. Weeks later, you take a carriage north, hours of bumpy, muddy roads through low hills and rain-blurred villages, and find yourself before a gate bearing no inscription. Only a brass pineapple finial that glints in the gray light. Beyond it stands the Dunmore pineapple. It's magnificent and deeply absurd. The tower rises above a garden wall, an ornate structure carved from stone, complete with curling leaves, toothy segments, and a finely tapered crown that pierces the sky like a royal scepter. The building beneath it is comparatively modest, a simple pavilion, but no one cares. The fruit steals the show. You walk slowly around the perimeter. The detail is exquisite. Masonry mimicking nature so perfectly, it seems to breathe. Some locals believe it keeps watch over the estate. Others think it wards off misfortune. One child claims it whistles when no one's near. You try whistling back. Nothing happens. Still, it's haunting. Later, over stew and ale at a nearby inn, you ask the landlord why someone would build such a thing. He chuckles. To show he could, I expect. Turns out the structure belongs to Lord Dunmore, a man with more money than sense, and a reputation for, as the landlord delicately puts it, agricultural flamboyance. Historians still argue about his motives. Some claim it was an homage to the fruit that once defined imperial luxury. Others say he simply loved the shape. One scholar insists it was a final glorious joke at the pineapple's expense. You rather like that idea, because Dunmore's monument isn't just decorative, it's a symbol. Not of the fruit itself, but of everything it stood for. Ambition, empire control over nature, and the soft madness of aristocratic whimsy. And it's not alone. You start noticing pineapple shapes everywhere. Atop church spires, etched into window frames, carved into balustrades, adorning gravestones and gateposts and fountains. Once you start looking, it's as if half of Britain has quietly decided to commemorate the fruit that once ruled its imagination. Why? Because it lingered. Even after the flavor disappointed, even after the banana usurped it, even after the wax fakes, and the satire, and the thefts, the pineapple remained. Not in kitchens, but in stone, solid, symbolic, slightly smug. You visit a manor house in Wiltshire with pineapple-shaped gate piers. The lady of the house tells you they were meant to welcome guests with hospitality and style. You don't mention that pineapples were for a time more closely associated with theft and passive aggression. Elsewhere, a hotel in Bath installs pineapple-shaped newel posts on its staircases. Keeps the guests from tripping, says the owner. You're unconvinced, but admire the commitment. Even in London, the fruit endures not in parlors or parties, but as a motif. You spot it on fireplace grates, chandeliers, and the occasional boot clasp. There's even a street lamp bearing a pineapple finial near Southwark Bridge. No one seems to know why. Some architects begin referring to it as the civil crown. Others call it the spiny dome. One jesting fellow coins the term pineapple Gothic. You hope it doesn't stick, but it might, because once a symbol escapes its fruit, it's free to grow into anything. And the pineapple, once feared, once fawned over, once foolishly adored, now quietly presides over rooftops and railings, its meaning softened by time. No longer luxury, no longer scandal. Just a shape, a story, a smile. That night, back in your lodgings, you sketch the Dunmore pineapple from memory, awkwardly, with too many leaves and not enough symmetry. Still, it makes you laugh. You tack it above your hearth, and for the first time in weeks, the room feels warmer. You're nursing a lukewarm tankard of ale in a grimy corner tavern in Wapping, when a sailor slumps down beside you and mutters, "Heard the Queen's chef threw one out." You glance at him. Threw out what? He taps the side of his nose. Pineapple. Said it went soft. No one even blinked. You stare at your drink. That means something. Not long ago, such an act would have caused diplomatic incident. A fruit like that displayed for days, whispered about, gently mourned. Its rot covered with herbs or silk scarves, not casually discarded like kitchen scraps. But the sailor's right. You start noticing signs that the pineapple's grip is fading. You pass a portrait gallery. The pineapple paintings are pushed to the back. A sign reads "Last Days of Empire Fruit." Attendance is dismal. At a garden party, a pineapple centerpiece goes untouched. By dessert, it's sagging slightly, and everyone pretends not to notice. A lady makes a joke about feeding it to the stable boys. No one disagrees. You see a boy juggle 3 pineapples at a street fair. One falls, splits open. Everyone laughs. No gasps, no reverence. Just fruit. You speak to a merchant who once rented out pineapples for 5 guineas a night. Now you can't give 'em away. He shrugs. Bananas stole the throne, and apricots are making a play. You meet an artist who used to paint nothing but pineapples, portraits, still life's allegories. He now sculpts clouds. The fruit had its arc, he says, brushing plaster from his sleeves. Now it's just a fruit again. Historians later refer to this phase as the decline. But decline isn't quite the right word. It's more like a soft forgetting. The pineapple doesn't vanish. It lingers. Quietly. Gently. Like the last notes of a song you can't quite hum. Some still try to bring it back. A minor noble hosts a pineapple-themed masquerade. Attendance is low. The costumes are damp. One woman's pineapple mask gives her a rash. You hear rumors of a pineapple revival society, 5 gentlemen meeting weekly to preserve the dignity of the crown-shaped fruit. Their minutes are mostly complaints about the price of shipping. At the theater, a play debuts titled "Farewell, My Golden Orb." You attend. The plot is muddled, involving mistaken identity and a talking fruit. The audience chuckles politely. No one cries. You wander the city quietly, noting every pineapple you see, one on a boot heel, two atop fence posts, a fading mural on the side of a spice shop half covered in soot and ivy, all ghosts of a brighter, stickier time. You return to a shop where you once paid to smell a pineapple. The shop is closed now. A sign reads, "Under new management selling practical items." You buy a nail file, and still part of you aches. Not for the fruit exactly, but for what it meant. The absurdity, the desire, the way an entire city once orbited a thing it barely understood. You attend one final dinner party, a modest gathering, candles flickering, a small, ripe pineapple at the center of the table. At dessert, the host stands, lifts a silver knife, says nothing. Then with no fanfare, no poetry, no powdered gasps, he cuts it. Perfect slices, equal portions. You eat in silence. It's sweet, just sweet enough. The room is warm. Someone hums softly. And in that moment, the pineapple is no longer a throne, or a scandal, or a riddle. It's food, at last. You wake one morning with the odd sensation that something has been lost, not urgently, not tragically, but like a hat left behind on a train. Something once clutched tightly, now fading into the folds of time. You dress slowly. The day is damp again as usual. The window panes sweat faintly with fog. And somewhere beyond the sounds of horses and chimney sweeps, a vendor calls out, fresh pears, bananas, none of them royal fruits. You smile, and you realize you haven't heard the word pineapple shouted in the street in weeks, and then it happens. You're walking along the edge of Hampstead Heath, enjoying the rare peace of mudless boots, when you pass a hedge-lined lane and see an old greenhouse, abandoned paint-peeling glass fogged over with grime. You pause. Curiosity gets the better of you, as it always does. You duck under a leaning beam, push open the rusted gate, and step into what was once a pinery. It's silent now. Inside, the beds are overgrown with moss. The old coal flue vents are cold and cracked. Ivy has made its home along the support beams. It smells of mildew and memory. But in the far corner, catching a stray beam of gray light, is a small wooden pedestal. And on it, a dried-out pineapple. Not wax, not wood, not painted, real. Browned and shriveled, its leaves brittle, its skin caved slightly in, but unmistakable. A relic. You approach slowly, half expecting it to turn to dust, but it holds. You imagine the people who came here, who whispered over its growth, who charted its progress, heated bricks at midnight, measured moisture like priests preparing an altar. You imagine the first time it turned yellow. The cautious hope, the terror, the joy, the restraint. And then the quiet decision we won't eat it. You sit on the edge of an overturned trough and just look. It occurs to you that this fruit outlived its entire moment. Everyone who once fought over it, posed beside it, dressed their children to match it. All gone. But the pineapple remains. There's something oddly comforting in that. Historians sometimes overlook this part of the story, the slow fade, the tucked-away remains. They talk about the frenzy, the satire, the fall, but not the after. Not the quiet. Not the way the fruit, once feared and worshipped, simply settled back into being what it always was. A tropical plant in the wrong climate. And yet here it is. Unforgotten, not revered, not mocked. Just there. You take a last look, then step back out into the mist. The lane is still empty. The wind tugs gently at your coat. Back home you light a candle, brew tea, and as it steeps, you take a piece of paper and write with no great ceremony. One shriveled pineapple in Hampstead. Found. Still whole. You don't know why you write it, only that it feels like closure. Not the dramatic kind, the real kind. The kind where something ends not with applause, but with a nod. A small, smiling sigh. A crown placed on a windowsill and left to dry with dignity. The letter arrives on faded parchment folded in neat thirds and smelling faintly of lavender and soot. It's from your cousin in Norfolk, a man known primarily for collecting broken weather vanes and once attempting to toast cheese on a lightning rod. It reads, "You'll never believe this, there's a haunted pineapple greenhouse out here. Locals say it whistles at night. Come quickly. Bring matches." You go, of course. The train ride is long and soggy, the landscape stitched with hedgerows and grazing sheep. And by the time you arrive, dusk has softened the countryside into layers of mist. The greenhouse is real. Half sunken into a private estate, long since sold to apathy. It leans against a crumbling wall like an elderly aunt who drank too much sherry and now needs steadying. Glass panes, many missing. Iron braces twisted by rust. And scrawled along the side in white chalk, the fruit still weeps. You stare, you snort. Your cousin appears behind you. Locals won't go near it, he whispers. Say it's cursed. Every winter solstice it moans. You push open the door with the toe of your boot. It creaks like a bad novel. Inside, it's damp and still. Ferns creep through the broken foundation. The old coal stove is dust-covered and dented. And in the far corner, on a lopsided stone plinth, sits a pineapple-shaped urn. You approach slowly. It's beautifully carved obsidian black, with golden etchings curling around its base like vines. On one side is engraved, "He who grew never tasted." Your cousin swallows audibly. That's creepy. You nod. The urn, it turns out, is a memorial. A tribute to a gardener named Elias Croft, who died shortly after successfully growing the estate's first pineapple. Some say he was struck by lightning. Others say he choked on a parsnip. One theory involves mold opera and unrequited love. Whatever the truth, the urn was placed here to honor his dedication, and thus the myth began. Each winter, when wind rips through the broken panes, it creates a keening wail, half whistle, half howl, that echoes across the fields. Locals began calling it the Pineapple Morning. You stay the night in a nearby cottage. At 3 in the morning, a low hum stirs you from sleep. Not a voice, not quite a sound, just pressure. Like something remembering it used to be alive. You lie still. And you think about the thousands of pineapples that came through London. All the ones polished, paraded, painted. All the ones hidden, hoarded, sniffed, and not eaten. All those little silent witnesses. You remember the stories, the paintings, the fake fruit, the scented oils, the hats, the heartbreak. And this final chapter, where even the ghosts wear spines. In the morning, you return to the greenhouse. The urn is still there. A small dry leaf has fallen beside it. You nod, unsure what you're nodding at. Your cousin wants to leave it an offering. You give him your last piece of dried mango. It feels appropriate. Later, as you board the train, you look back once. The greenhouse stands still. The chalk letters are gone washed by dew or by some quiet hand. But you hear something. Not a moan, a whisper. Faint, like a breeze moving through leaves that no longer grow. He who grew. And then the wheels rattle forward and the story moves on. You're sitting in your usual spot at the edge of Hyde Park Wynd, in your sleeves pigeons arguing by your boot, when a little girl walks by clutching a balloon shaped unmistakably like a pineapple. Bright yellow, cartoonishly spiked, smiling face drawn on the side. You chuckle. You've seen the fruit through every incarnation, luxury, medicine, scandal, metaphor, meme, and now mascot. Later that day, you pass a bakery. In the window, a pineapple-shaped marzipan cake with googly eyes and the words, "Happy Retirement." Dave piped in shaky icing. Inside, a clerk giggles as she packs pineapple scones into pastel boxes. No bell jars, no security guards, just food, just fun. You stop at a gift shop near the Strand. A shelf of pineapple trinkets, soaps, tea towels, novelty socks. One mug reads, "Stand tall, wear a crown, be sweet inside." You cringe, but only slightly. This is what's become of the fruit. No longer feared, no longer faked, no longer worshipped or mocked. Beloved. You see it on postcards, children's backpacks, public fountains shaped like fruit bowls. There's even a pineapple mural near Shoreditch, all bright colors and squiggles titled, "Crown of the People." And you realize the fruit has done what very few symbols ever managed to do. It survived itself. It went from precious to pompous to punchline, and kept going. Because it wasn't just a fruit. It was a story. One written not in ink, but in obsession, laughter, longing wrought, and eventual joy. It wasn't the taste. It was the chase. You pass a cafe offering Pineapple Wednesdays, and think back to your first encounter, crowds at the docks, candlelit portraits, velvet cushions, stern old ladies swooning over spikes. Now pineapple is cheap, but not small. Now it belongs to everyone. You reach into your coat pocket and find a tiny carved pineapple charm a friend gave you months ago. You'd forgotten it was there. You rub your thumb across the grooves. It's warm from your touch. And you smile. Because the pineapple is no longer a mystery, no longer a myth. It's something better. It's familiar. A part of your world. A part of your past. A shape in your memory. And if you're very still, you can feel it humming inside you, not loudly, not grandly, but gently, like the softest echo of a story well told. And now, as we bring this long, strange journey to a close, you let the rhythm of the story slow. Let your thoughts settle like dust in a quiet room after guests have gone. The fruit, the fog, the distant bells and candlelight. They all drift backward now soft as evening mist curling over damp cobblestones. You imagine walking through a silent greenhouse long after everyone has left. The air is warm. The glass fogs at the edges. Somewhere in the corner, an old pineapple rests content whole, finally forgotten. Outside, the streets are calm. No more shouts, no more scandal, no more songs. Just the hush of a city asleep and the distant rustle of trees. You breathe in slowly. Let the story fade. Let the images blur like watercolor on paper. Let the laughter echo, once then vanish. The pineapple is gone now, but the calm remains. You lie still, wrapped in quiet, warmed by memory, blanketed in peace. You've wandered through centuries tonight, through greenhouses and portraits and powdered gossip. You've met ghosts and gardeners, duchesses and street thieves. You've walked through every shade of wonder and folly and sweetness. And now you rest. You're home. The lights are low. The world is still. And the fruit dreams softly in its frame. Good night.